Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy, you could never unlock my secret. Oh no! Suddenly, no, leave me! Let's begin. Indeed.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside Chat, where we bring on really interesting guests that, whether they are intentionally involved in the sort of like men's issues conversation or not, I think are important for you guys to know about. So today I have a very exciting guest, Eric July. And Eric is, he's kind of a Renaissance man, right? So he does music. He does like different like metal and rap, and you do political commentary, and now you're going into comic books and animation, and it's all very exciting stuff. So welcome to the show, Eric. First off, welcome.
Hey, I appreciate you having me, man, and thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, no, I think the stuff is amazing, and I'm glad to see people are just doing what you're doing. Like there, some have come before us, and many hopefully will come after. So, I want to ask you. We're definitely going to talk about the comic book a little bit, but before we get into it, I wanted to know a little bit about why you have your finger in so many different sort of soups. Like what is it? What is it? It's just like the nature of your personality. Like tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's like I grew up and I kind of was into a little bit of everything, and I think that God just blessed me with these different talents, but more so I need to be creating, right? And that's what really the last, let's say, decade and some change had been. It was me trying different things out that I was interested in, and really I was only seeing the most success with things that I did that were creative, like that were in the creative space. It's very fulfilling to do it. So, with the following that I built up over the years, YouTube, what have you on the internet, it was really just me just being me. So whether it was like metal stuff or I want to do vocal covers, I woke up, I did that. If I wanted to speak about a social topic or a political topic, I could do that, or comic books, I could do that. But nonetheless, for sure, the important thing here is that I create. And I think that's why you got like the band and Ripperverse right now. Why those, among all else, those have been the most successful ventures that I've ever been a part of. And like I said, it's more about fulfilling. I was blessed with these talents. I better use them. And it feels good to do it. Like I'm not doing anything that I don't like to do, right? I wake up and everything that I do, I thoroughly enjoy doing. And it's, like I say, fulfilling. To get up, wake up, and be able to do whatever it is you want, and there's going to be an audience for it. So a lot of it was, I don't want to say by chance, because I was involved in so many different things, being young, and whatever worked for me. But also it's just when you combine that with the work ethic and the fact that I feel like I was placed here on this earth to create. Here we are. So that's why I'm kind of involved in just everything.
And out of curiosity, does your like worldview, you're an ANCAP, and I'm friends with ANCAPs. I think it is like a good sort of default starting place, for like how you sort of organize your life. Does that inform your creativity? And what I mean by that is, just to be clear, because one of the things that people talk about in the sort of like mainstream culture or mainstream popular culture is that they're bothered by the messaging, right? Like there's this overt, beating you over the head with like a sermon about whatever the cause is at the time. And I think that our views and our values do influence our work, right? Yeah. So that's why I'm asking. So I'm not, it's not really about whether or not you're being preachy, because I think you don't have to do that. But it's more about like, what is like, does your value system influence your work?
Well, absolutely. And I would say at most, you mentioned the ANCAP stuff. I think from the economics of it all, you know what I mean? Like, I look at the Ripperverse and why that became a thing. That was, well, us seeing the problems that plague the industry and wanting to do something about it. And understanding that it's not going to be handed to us. It's not going to be anything that we kind of stumble across. It's going to be a lot of work to be done. And because I understand markets, right? And I understand economics. This is one of those things where it was, I don't want to say easy, but I'm going to, and people like myself are going to trend towards being part of those solutions and creating in various different industries, as opposed to like begging to be accepted or hoping that, you know, the shot callers change their view and all that. So I think for sure if it influences me just in how I act, you know, as a certain individual. I think it all, and to your point, like it's going to show itself in various different ways. And I think from a businessman's perspective would probably be very high up on the list of how that kind of people are able to pick that up, not necessarily from the messaging, like the individual material, but certainly how things are set up and independence. And like, you know, our business being, we're our own distributor, right? Ripperverse is our own distributor. So, you know, we want to keep so much in-house. That's very well about decentralization, which again, you know, I'm an ANCAP. That's one of the things that we lead with as a strategy. So yeah, I would for sure say that in those different aspects, it's certainly you could see it show up.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's something else to it too, because I stopped consuming mainstream media a long time ago. It just wasn't, it wasn't doing it for me. It was really predictable. I don't know if you've noticed that, but when they make an announcement about something, I'm like, okay, it's gonna have this, this, and this, and it does, like just every time. So it's like, I don't need to watch it because I already know. But what I think, it's not just the philosophy about how you sort of present the product, because that's what, a true capitalist is going to respond to the market, not try to create a market, not say, well, you have to drink Bud Light, or right, you have to shop at Target. It's like, well, or we'll call you a bigot. It's like, well, we're going to try to figure out what it is the market wants and then respond to it, right? So in your case, everybody was fed up with the state of comics, and fortunately, comics has a pretty low, let's say, cost to entry, right? Like people are really upset about what's going on with video games, but the problem with video games as an industry is it's really expensive to break in unless you're going to start off really, really indie, and you need a lot of high skilled people, and then you're hoping that you'll get exposure. And Steam is good for that, but as far as its cultural impact, it doesn't have the same entry potential that comics does. And it's one of the reasons why I was interested in getting involved in comics as well. And so that brings me to another thought. It's about stories. So your ANCAP values are reflected obviously in this. I guess you value things like liberty and the ability to what I call choose the good, right? Because like what a lot of wokies will do is they'll say, you have to give up all of your power to the state or give us your tax money so that we can do good on your behalf. But the problem with that is that people aren't choosing it because it's being forced on them, right? So there's nothing moral about that, even if you think you're saving the planet or whatever it is that the current crisis might be. So then what I was wondering about is where do you get your, how does your sort of morals come out in your storytelling, and where do you get those from?
I mean, I think that if you look at general universal truths, I think that's where they would be the most present. And I think that a lot of those truths, even people that would be the wokies or people whatever side of the political aisle, they generally understand those as concepts. They might not extend them to the logical conclusion, but as far as what is good, what is evil, what is just, what is righteous, there's a general understanding about what that is. I think where people start to differentiate is that they think that, and to your point, that it's on them to try to enforce that viewpoint on every individual in terms of one cohesive sort of action. So you don't have the ability to be an individual per se. So I think that as far as the universal truths, those are very liberty minded. When you look at what is just, what is good, what is right, and I think those are where where in the storytelling where you're going to see it. It's going to be less about me. I'm not making like and cap the comic, right? That's not what it is.
That wouldn't. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's not necessarily what it is that what it is that I'm doing, but it will show itself when you see that faced with whatever sort of adversity a character is trying to do good, right? And I think that's where it blends into, and why I believe that our element of storytelling in comic books is it's such a digestible thing, because even people, whether they know it or not, they understand the difference between generally what is right and what is wrong. So that's kind of, I would believe, where it shows in our approach to storytelling. We don't make like Mary Sue's. I think people that read the first Isom book understand that he's a very flawed character. And there's a level of adversity and perseverance that's going to have to obviously take place in this whole first arc. And you're watching them go through that. And I think that's very important, because I mean, any regular individual, no matter where it is you're from, you're going to be faced with those types of decisions. And what's going to make you a good person versus a bad one is obviously going to be how you take that, or what's thrown at you, and what do you make of that. And I think that's the type of approach that we have.
And so did you grow up with comic books?
Yes.
So I did too. So when I'm gonna be 50 in a couple months, and well, I remember when I was like 8-9 years old. My mother, she, we were really poor. She would go to this drugstore because she worked as sort of like a nurse's assistant, and they had, at these drugstores, they had these, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but that you get like 10 comic books, right? And they're in a plastic bag with the covers torn off, because like nobody bought them, and they were random issues, right? And she would give them to me, and I would just read through them. And even though I would have no context, I wouldn't know what happened before, and I'd probably never find out what happened after. I was just so like sucked into it. And I think that you're right about the fact that when it comes to something that has a moral arc, like the morality is, I'm not saying it has to be black and white, but it should be like somewhat clear cut. So absolutely. For example, I think there's a reason why some of the classic literature, like Tolkien's work, is it lasts so long. It's transcendent, right? Because the themes in it are universal. They're just, it's not that the events actually happened. It's that the events are true, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's why they stick with people. And I don't think it's really hard to do that, but we are at a place now in our popular culture where everything is about everything being shades of gray, and morality isn't like clear cut. And there are characters who are clearly villains if you look at it objectively, but you can tell that the storytellers are trying to tell you Absolutely. That it's justifiable, right? Like I can give you an example. So I did not like Black Panther, the movie. And I love the character, though. Like, I was a huge fan of the character, right? Love the character, but I thought the movie was bad. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but one of the things that really upset me was that I don't know if it was Ryan Coogler or some of the writers that he had or whatever, but they were really trying to make the Killmonger character the hero. To somehow he was wronged, and that like whatever he wanted to do should have happened, and that thinking, it did not work with me. And I think that most people have some kind of instinct that it's like, wait a minute, like the Thanos thing. I don't know if you know, but at that time I was still watching those movies. I think I stopped after Endgame because I was upset with how it ended. But like the Thanos thing, there was a lot of people saying, oh yeah, he's kind of got a point. I'm like, oh, killing half of all life in the universe. I mean, but they were trying to sell this, right? And sometimes they would hide behind this like idea of, well, we want the villains to not be one-dimensional, so we're gonna. But it's like, no, but like this is still objectively evil. Like it's it's pretty clear cut. Yeah. So where I started to like really resonate with this sort of moral frame was from old comic books, because I think I kind of like started to tune out in the 90s because some of that like gray morality was starting to creep in back then. But like before that, man, I was like, I loved Superman, and I know a lot of people don't, but I think that like characters like that are very difficult to do because they're all powerful, but they have like a very, very strict morality. Captain America's like that. And then you can have fun with characters like the X-Men, which was one of my favorite books growing up, right? So that's kind of what I was wondering about. These like, is that one of the reasons why you were a fan of comics? Was it like that kind of like the moral frame of the time? I don't know like how old you are, what you were reading back then.
Well, for sure. I mean, that I think I've been burnt out on this idea of that gray area, because it's different from, it's not even an anti-hero, because even if you think of an anti-hero, he's just a cutthroat hero.
Like Punisher?
Yeah, where it's still like, hey, I'm doing something that is punishing people for doing evil things. So there's no gray area there at all, really. He will go the line or cross the line that other characters won't. That's really the main differentiation. But what's bad is still bad. But yeah, like the Killmonger thing is, I think, a primary example of where these people are at and what they do. And I think this is where, this whole conversation obviously pops off with how does your moral sort of framework or lack thereof influence your writing? And I think that's what's happened with that type of character being dressed up, because people want to feel like they can justify bad behavior, right? So what better way to do that than to create some other character, and you create all these gray areas like, yeah, what he's doing is screwed up. And often you'll see these same type of people that would herald that also in real life will say, well,
that's right,
that is just unjustified, like it's an objectively bad thing. They will be like, well, it's permissible because of X, Y, and Z. Right. So I think that's where for those guys, and to your point, that's kind of where the Ripperverse kind of comes from. It's like there's a multitude of issues that plague the comic book industry. And I just wanted to be a part of that solution. But I absolutely am annoyed by that. I still think that there's level of complexity and fun that certainly you can have weaved into the storytelling. But yeah, that whole gray area type of character to try to justify them, like after they've done something like atrocious, right? Killmonger, the primary example. After they've done something that is just legitimately bad. That's kind of old.
Yeah, like this is why I think stories are so important. So I think that we that are not, I guess you could say, part of the Hollywood club or the mainstream like popular culture, the stuff that like what Netflix does and all these other big giant multi-million-dollar studios, they see the landscape of storytelling for what it is, the importance of it, how much influence it can have, and they're using that to sort of engineer people, right? I mean, it's you could say it's propaganda too. I mean, but we have that everywhere. It's in our media, it's in our schools. It's everywhere. We're being bombarded with it, and it starts with the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of the difference, right? And the thing about comic books was that they were inexpensive enough and they were attractive to young people, and so they pick up an issue of Spider-Man and they know what he's about and what his enemies are about, and like that that the Spider-Man I remember around the time that it was like after the Tobey Maguire movies came out, they did like a poll or something about who everybody's most favorite superhero was, and it was always Spider-Man. Spider-Man came out number one for many years, and it's because he is like a I would say an ideal reflection of the average comic book reader, right? He's like a young man, maybe feels a little like an outcast, but wants to do great things. They want to go on the adventure, and this is why generally men are attracted to comics. Not to say that women won't read them, but the structure of the hero's journey is a male journey in general, and women they'd like to go on the ride too. But we're living in a time now where everything is being inverted, because when you're trying to do something new, like I could think of like older books that did do something new but didn't really stray too far away from the formula, like the Ninja Turtles comics. I read the old black and white, that were like the hardcore ones, that were violent. But they were still, it was still a good story. It's still like sort of, you had your heroes and you had your villains, right? And there was pretty clear cut. But like today, people are missing the point, and that they're because they're getting hung up on this kind of narcissistic identity thing, right? Where they have to see themselves in something. And I think that it's something that's being pushed on us too. I think generally people don't need that, but they think they do because they're being told that they do. Do you know what I mean?
Learned trait. That's 100% a learned trait. I brought this point up a million times, like with the concept of like representation, and like when people, that's the justification for really everything, every change that they do to certain forms of media. It's always in the name of inclusivity and representation, and it is narcissism, certainly, but it's one of those things where it forces that individual, if they are going to adopt that, to be as shallow as they possibly can, where nothing's really interesting about them outside of I guess, let me say this: the most interesting thing to them is about them is largely superficial in the grand scheme of thing, and largely something that you didn't control, like me being black. You know what I mean? Like I just kind of came out this way, right? I didn't necessarily earn it, right? It was like one of those things that happened. And there are various characters that doesn't matter what racial makeup. Obviously, you bring up Spider-Man. I mean, all the youngsters from a multitude of different ethnic backgrounds have loved that character, despite him maybe being a white character, and that's never been a sort of issue. But what they've done, unfortunately, and anybody that certainly has had children, whether it be you've had them directly, you got nieces, nephews, whatever it is, you know that youngsters don't really think like that, even in like how they play with each other. That's not like anything that they care anything about. Nope. So when they start hyper emphasizing like race and other aspects of it, that's a learned trait. That's something that they picked up from someone else. And maybe it's the schooling, maybe it is directly a reflection of their parents, but that's not something that's like naturally occurring by any means. And if you just see little kids, they're at a playground playing, doing the thing, they do not care about that type of stuff, and it goes to show how much of a learned trait it is. And even there's pockets of the world that may have different like racial backgrounds, but they're not like at this constant strife like it feels like we are here in America. Because that's not anything that's not part of their real subculture to be that divisive. So it 100% is a learned trait. Absolutely.
I think that it's pushed on young people because they are more prone to be like, oh, I guess I am supposed to feel different about this white kid or whatever because he's white, right? And so it is absolutely pushed on him. And it's it's funny you bring up the Peter Parker thing, because I was like, when I started hearing about this, it actually really upset me because I loved Spider-Man since I was little, and I'm like, are you telling me that I'm not supposed to like him because he's not Puerto Rican? Right, and then like that's ridiculous. And so it's like, oh, did you think that all this time that this character that sold like millions, if not billions and billions of comics, okay, was only being read by straight white men from Queens that were like that doesn't make sense. Like it's so stupid, right? So like I got so another I don't know if because you're into the gaming thing, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit too, because I'm a huge gamer. I love the Dark Souls series, right? But it reminded me of something else. So one of the hobbies I got into as a high schooler was Dungeons and Dragons, so tabletop gaming, right? And at the time, it was like a fringe thing, and it was actually my white friend in my high school. So I went to high school in Chicago by Cabrini Green, which at the time was like the roughest project in the whole city. So I came from the hood. I came from poverty, right? And there was this white kid. He didn't live there because that wouldn't have worked out for him. But he went to the school there, and he introduced me to D&D, and we played the crap out of that. And then recently I saw that D&D was becoming really popular and it was going mainstream, and I was like, oh, this is going to go mainstream, and then people are going to start policing it and all that. And sure enough, it happened. They were like, oh, well, it's historically been only played by straight white men. And I'm like, you guys are just the worst people. Like they are so bad, because I think that they're trying to create a kind of, and this is in every industry, right? Every part of our culture, they're trying to create unrest and they're trying to create division. It's not an accident, okay? Because if they get what they want, like if and they have, right? They just look for more things. And what they ultimately seem to be doing is, honestly, and this is why this is a men's channel, they're taking away all the things that men like, all of the things that boys grow up with, all of the things that bring men together, right? Like the hobbies, like the culture of comics, the culture of anime, the culture of board games and tabletop games and video games. These are all hobbies that men have. And
sure.
Yeah, they are. I mean, again, girls do it too, but it's driven by men. It's driven by men that buy into it, and I think that is completely on purpose. So, and what I've noticed, and let me know if you think that I'm getting close to the money on this, is that when they change something, the only thing they can do, so they can't actually make small changes. They have to completely invert everything. So, they change, like, they make the Indiana Jones, right? They take Indiana Jones and they make him like a loser, divorcee, a has-been and all that. And then they bring in this woman that's, as smarter than he is, better than he is and everything. And they've done this with, I don't know, everything, basically. They did it with Star Wars. They did it with, the Marvel movies. They've done it across the board. And nobody responds well. I mean, it sells some tickets for, again, insecure narcissists. But in general, they don't make money because people know instinctively something is wrong with this, right? And by the way, the race thing, this is also interesting because I've said this before. They will promote black heroes that are male until it's time to change them into women too, and they will do that. They will, because
they'll feminize them for sure.
Yeah, they will, or they'll just eliminate them. Look at I can give you a couple of examples. I heard, because I haven't watched it, but my friend Dave Cullen, he has a channel called the Dave Cullen Show on YouTube, and I've known him for a number of years, and he did a video about this secret invasion thing. Now, Nick Fury was a favorite character of many people, right? And for a while, he was the guy that kind of had the plan and all that. But in this show, because he's the main character, he's just a beta. Like everybody talks about him or whatever. They did it with Patrick Stewart on Star Trek. They did it with the Black Panther even. And this is like not I know that Chadwick Boseman passed away, rest in peace, but even in his own movie, all the women were dominating him. Like, he was, I always say that his best appearance was in Civil War. That was like the baddest Black Panther. I was excited, for that, but like they dropped the ball after that. So I don't know if you noticed that inversion, but there is like a serious inversion going on.
Well, 100%. I mean, I think they're on a mission for sure to bastardize definitely things that have existed and have been around that are recognizable. So I don't think it's an accident by any means, because they've attempted to, even with quote unquote new characters, and because nobody will give it the time of day because they see it from a mile away what goofy stuff you're trying to do, they recognize very early on that is not something that's conducive. So what in turn they did was say, okay, what if we just hijack things that are already a thing? And at minimum, you're going to turn some heads, right? And they're going to at least give you the time of day because, well, it's a character that you grew up loving, right? It's a character that it's recognizable. So whether it has that brand, Star Wars or Marvel or DC, or you mentioned what's happening with Indiana Jones and what's going on from
James Bond, Doctor Who,
it just keeps going, and they go after those because that's the only place that they'll get the time of day to tell their little goofy stories anyway. And I do think there is a bit of hatred, I guess.
Absolutely.
Because they look at these characters and they're like, well, they know that these cocky writers know they would never be able to create something that's comparable. Never. They don't have the know-how. They have the vision. They can't do it. Yeah. And I think that aggravates them. I think that aggravates them. So they probably, I think they get off. It was like what Taika Waititi when that
about Thor.
He told me like, I'll ruin your lore. But that's what he said. You know what I mean? So I think there's a bit of narcissism and just all around.
There's resentment.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the perfect term for like the audience. And like I said, I don't think that's an accident by any means.
No, not at all. It's basically like Cain and Abel. And they're angry with the people who came before them because they essentially gave a worthy sacrifice to the culture in their storytelling. The best example is Tolkien. And Amazon, they were like, well, we have billions of dollars. We're just going to make something better. And they gave us Rings of Power and nobody's watching, right? Because they're missing the point. And yes, you're right. They're absolutely really resentful and jealous of the fact that people will not let go of what came before. However, there is a contingent of people, I like to call them culture junkies is what I call them. These are people who will forgive anything the studio does because they get to keep watching their favorite stuff, right? They will make excuses. They'll say, oh, the Doctor Strange in the Mouth of Madness, or whatever it was called, like, that wasn't that bad. I mean, we got Doctor Strange, and there was, Reed Richards was in it, and like, Black Bolt was in it, but then they will make any excuse. They'll say, oh, I like Miles Morales, he's well written, and I'm like, but it's basically just Peter Parker with like the same everything, right? Oh no, he's got his parents. No, I mean, it's basically the same, guys. Like, but yeah, the culture junkies. So I'm trying to shake them out because they kind of, I don't want to call them the normies, because I think even the normies are like walking away. This is why, what was the Indiana Jones movie? Yeah. It bombed, and then what was the what? Which one?
The Flash.
Oh yeah, the Flash. Yeah. So those movies bombed. So clearly the normies are voting with their dollars. Like that, there was a movie that came out the same weekend, I think, or on July 4th. It's called The Sound of Freedom. An indie film about like child sex trafficking. That movie made way more money than Indiana Jones. That's crazy. Like, I'm impressed and I'm glad, but I am surprised because you would have thought that something with the name Indiana Jones would just make $1 billion, right? But people are seeing now this pattern that doesn't seem to end, So I want to know what you think about this thing I call the culture junkies, the people who just, they want to make any excuse. Do you know? I have friends like that.
That's a problem. I mean, I've long told people to get. I mean, if I could, of all people, let go of Marvel and DC, I'm not giving anybody any excuse, right? Because if I could do it, as much as so intertwined that I was with that, I feel like anybody can do it. But it's like, you cannot reward. I mean, this with children. This with it's just basic human action that rewarding bad behavior incentivizes them to continue to do it, right? So if you actually recognize that this is something that is not good, or they are bastardizing something, it's best to walk away from that, as opposed to rewarding them with, or even putting them under the illusion that, well, some people actually enjoyed this. Instead, you're tolerating it more than anything. You don't actually enjoy it. It's more like, well, it's a recognizable brand and you might have enjoyed it, and that's it. That's really where the buck stops. You tolerate it. Tolerate its existence. You're not really into it. But yeah, it's a problem because, you're always, you're definitely for newer creatives, like you're fighting against that type of person who will continue to give them the benefit of the doubt no matter what it is that they do. And to me, I'm a very simple man. Once you've made it abundantly clear that you're not doing this with myself in mind, then it's on me as an individual to act accordingly, right? So we talked about it earlier with the amount of just resentment that these guys have made it abundantly clear that they, especially like fans, older fans of this stuff, they do not like you. They in fact find you as a hurdle. So for me, once they made that clear, I'm done. Like, I'm like, all right, well, I got to start acting accordingly. I can't reward this bad behavior. And I think you're starting to see a little more of it, but yeah, there's still these people that unfortunately cling to, well, it was okay, or it's going to be okay. And it's like, dude, the Marvels, that's dead on arrival, man. Like, that's not, just accept the fact.
I mean, if you didn't see it when Star Wars died, that was it. Like, when Star Wars died, I was like, okay, these people don't understand the hero's journey. They don't read Joseph Campbell. Nothing else good could come out of this, because like, once you miss that, it's so, like, Star Wars is so easy to make money on, and yeah, it is really, like, somebody did the work. I mean, now people are like, those prequels aren't bad, like,
in comparison.
Yeah, I know it. So, back to comics for a second. Do you know Steve Ditko? I assume you know.
Yes.
Of Steve Ditko. So, in case people here don't know, Steve Ditko was the guy who basically created Spider-Man. I mean, at least he designed and did the artwork for all the early issues. Maybe Stan Lee was, responsible for writing it too, and I'm not going to take that away from him. I love Stan Lee too, but Ditko is an interesting character because he made a comic. Have you heard of his individual comic called Mr. A? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I read some Mr. A books, and it's sort of like you can kind of see the kind of like cultural war that's happening today. You can see it in a microcosm back then, because when he made his book, a lot of people were, you know, not happy with his sort of like objectivist approach. Now, I agree that it's not easy to write a character like that. But I think that he was trying. And, you know, I think that it's important that people are trying, which is, I think, what a lot of folks are doing today that are trying to make their own content, right? They're you know, we'll stumble, we'll fall, we might even fail, but I think that people are trying. So I guess I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on Ditko's work, if you've seen it?
Oh, well, of course. I mean, Ditko's Ditko. I mean, you can't beat the classics, and certainly as far as how influential he was to this industry, there's no way around that. But you know, writing these stories that have, again, really what it is, it's just a little more, because definitely a lot of the early Marvel, particularly the earlier Marvel stuff was, yeah, the good and evil, all that stuff was there, but it was a very, it took them a little bit to start adding a little more complexity to their levels of various forms of storytelling. It was really, like, definitely if you read some of the stuff out in the 60s, it was really, really simple. But you know, guys like Ditko, and obviously going into the 70s and the 80s, and you got some of these more complex stories, still great stories. And I think that maybe it was ahead of its time, because, you know, you've seen definitely the objectivist approach. You know, a character that comes to mind for me is like Anarchy, which is a character that DC's Anarchy. And it's funny, like, because they started him as the typical like commie anarchist.
Oh, right? Yeah, sure.
Right.
That thing that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's funny, they turned him into more of a objectivist, right? Type of anarchist, more Ayn Rand kind of influenced stuff. Opposed to, and it worked, right? The character became a lot more liked, obviously, like that, because it resonated obviously with more people. So I think that could be said for several different types of storytellers, where sometimes you're early, you know what I mean? And people don't get it when they get
people
it.
People aren't ready yet for that, right?
That's generally what happens sometimes, and you gain more of appreciation. I can say that for even like for what like some of the editors did, like Jim Shooter, you know, he facilitated basically the most successful era of Marvel, you know, in the 80s, and the rise of the X-Men with Claremont, all that stuff. Like he facilitated all that. And he had a rather bad rap for a long time. And then you come to find, after speaking with people like of the old, like he kept the wheels churning, and that's why he didn't like. It wasn't because he was a bad person. It was because, well, he made people make sure artists made their deadlines, made sure that this is why he facilitated the best deal. And now you look at the state of Marvel, and you're like, they needed Jim Shooter like bad. Like they didn't appreciate him when he was a thing. Certainly working with Marvel. So sometimes it happens, whether it be writer, artist, editor, anybody in the creative space. Sometimes it's just early on. And that can be a difficult spot to be in.
So let's talk about your book, Isom. And so you're currently working on number 2, right?
Well, 2's done. Now
working on 3. You're working on number 3, right?
Yeah, 3. I'm working on number 3. 2's done. Obviously, the pre-order is live right now for that. But yeah, I'm writing actually 3. I'm about 25 pages in on 3.
Yeah. So okay, without giving anything away, because I know you want people to read it. What is the kind of like, because when I was reading comics, all right, I would read different books for different things like that I wanted. So you know, like the best Captain America books were sort of like political thrillers. You know, the best and when I say political, I don't mean partisan. I mean like it was like in the realm of like, you know, his relationship to the government and his patriotism. And then, like, when you read X-Men books, they had a different feel. When you read Spider-Man, it's a different feel, right? You're going for different things. And I was always a Marvel kid growing up. So, like, what's the feel that you're getting, that you're trying to put out for this book?
Well, obviously, there's a level of familiarity with the character itself, right? You see Isom, he has a slick, sort of more simplified.
I love those.
Right,
I love those. You remember Vindicator from Alpha Flight? That was I love that costume. I thought that was the shit.
So it's like, just, you know, it's simple. And that was all by design, because I was trying to launch this company off a character that had it was new, it was fresh, but it had some level of familiarity. So a comic book lifer could like say, "Oh yeah, I want to learn more about the character itself."
Yeah.
But I mean, Isom 1 particularly it was a very tough job, right? It's not just launching Isom's book. It's also launching the entire Ripperverse, right? It launched everything. So, Isom 1 begins with he'd already been a hero and retired, right? Isom as a aka also known as a Avery Sealman. So we're picking up during the spot where he had been a hero for years, and now he's retired. He's on his own, in the hero life, he's doing his own thing. He lives on his own ranch right outside of this big city. And with Isom 1, he gets a call from his sister, and his sister's like, "Hey, I had this girl that was interning with her, and they all know him as a family friend, and she's gone missing, AWOL. Can you go to this old friend of yours by the name of Darren Fontano and just check and see what's going on? Because that's where she had last heard that he was." And that's when the shenanigans start to take place, because he's going back into this massive city that he goes still within his job, but he's always reluctant. That's why he lives outside of the city in the first place. So that's when everything takes place, and we're picking up with Isom 2, obviously, after the events that take place there, where, he's already ran into all these other like special people in this world we call X-Up. He's ran into Yacht, ran into the Alpha Corps. He's ran into some of the other members like Santuan, who we fought twice in the first book. And now he's dealing with those consequences, having approached Darren Fontano, which again was his old friend. That's basically, he's a cutthroat kind of guy. So we're picking up there, and I'm glad that we have a lot of return viewers, readers, excuse me, of the book. That means they enjoyed it, you know what I mean? And that was the hard act to follow there. And obviously, with us having the success it is that we're having right now, entering almost 1.8 million already, and that's just really showing that it resonated with it. And that's what it was about. It was about giving people good material, and giving people something to look forward to in comics, which is just much needed right now.
Absolutely. And I think, as an artist, I think that a really good design is very, very important, because you want it to be something that people like recall instantly. That's why, costume designs like Spider-Man's and the Fantastic Four and Wolverine, they pop because like you see the silhouette, you know what that is, right? The Batman thing, you know what it is, right? So it's very important for building that kind of like they say visual dictionary, right? Like, I know what this so and so looks like. And then even if you like make little changes, like Batman's been through a number of costumes, but there's a unifying features, absolutely. Right? So they all have the ears, right, and the cape with the scallops on it. So there's that, and then the other thing I was going to mention is, so does your book have battles in it and action? Because I'm saying this because one thing I noticed before I stopped reading comics is that like they stopped doing action. Like if there was one, it would be like one panel, a guy punches somebody and it's over, and then they get back to like the soap opera stuff.
Talking in a diner.
Yeah, it's like talking in a diner, or now I think it's like slice of life stuff, like people go into the cafe and like who's sleeping with who, and it's like, and the villains are hanging out with the heroes, and like, but I mean it is, and then I'm like, well, wait a minute, where's the action? Where's the tension? Where's the adventure? Right. Yeah. So I assume your stories do have that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a way that, definitely in my form of storytelling, where I don't want to hold the audience's hand. A lot of it is told through the action of what's like, people want to know what's Isom's capabilities, right? That's all told through. It's not necessarily some of it, but for the first book, you're seeing him do certain things that give you kind of, an eye on what he is capable of doing. The same can be said for the other characters as well. I think with any book, in the superhero genre, at least, I mean, I think you have a little more leeway with other stuff. But definitely in the superhero genre, I think you have to have a nice little balance of that, and to completely remove the action in its entirety. I mean, that's where you see the artists kind of really show how good they are, right? And do their thing. That's where they shine, doing those action scenes. So as a creative, and more specifically as a writer, you have to be able to have those moments in a superhero. It's different if you're telling a different type of comic per se, but definitely in the superhero world. A lot of people look forward to that, to those
They want to see the action, like,
yeah, for
and
sure.
it's a boy thing, sure, because
Oh yeah, 100%.
like, we know how many times have you been on the internet and you see, like, fans arguing over, like, which character is gonna beat which character in a fight, right? And they pick who's stronger, or like, can it's like, what was the meme? Can he defeat Goku? Yeah. So, but there's a reason for it, because it's kind of like in the nature of men to measure their potential, and you test it by that, and they want to see it tested. And I think that you're right about, like, superhero books, but not only. I mean, you can find this in kung fu books, and like books about samurai, books about anything where it requires somebody to put forth
a level of conflict.
Right? Conflict that's physical, right?
Yeah.
And what I think, if I'm super charitable to the big two, what they've been doing is they're trying to satisfy, like, as many people as possible. So
the master of none.
Yeah, exactly. And they're master of none. And what they end up with is you get these books that are basically soap operas. And if you watch TV, they do the same thing. Like, why does anyone watch the CW? It's just soap opera stuff, and occasionally they put on tights. And it doesn't work. It's not what boys want, right? They want to see the resolution. They want to see someone try to do harm and then someone else stop them at the end of the day, in the simplest terms, right? Even if it, it's funny, because even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, like I watched, since I don't watch anything new anymore, I've been watching old stuff, and I watched Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire and Dr. Octopus, right? And there's this fight in the bank that they have. It's the most comic booky thing ever, right? They're just fighting in a bank, and they're literally throwing bags with dollar signs on them at each other. And and nobody cares. Like, nobody's saying that's not realistic. And one of the things I noticed about modern writers, I guess woke writers, I suppose, since that's most modern mainstream writers, is that they take things too literally, but not seriously. And I don't know if you understand what I mean by that, but they like to deconstruct things. They like to say, oh, this doesn't make sense because, and then they sort of, like, as Alan Watts said, they disenchant it. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm right there with you, actually, on that. And look, and that's all, to me, stems from knowing your audience, right? And knowing who is the target demographic. And you've brought that point up, and we, about this whole trying to appeal to the widest demographic. I don't know what data they're looking at. It's wrong, whatever it is, where they think that, like, this, for example, comics, the primary audience is going to be, again, doesn't mean it's going to be young men.
It's going to be young men.
That's just who is going to gravitate towards this. And to not consider that is idiotic. It's certainly from a business standpoint. But we've seen this idea also creep in other aspects where people feel like it's narcissism, right? Because they feel more egotistical than anything.
For sure.
They feel like you have to live up to a certain standard to be a customer of them. So they're trying to teach you what you should like, as opposed to you filling that void or feeling that what it is that the market actually dictates. So that's why you have this obsession of mass appeal, and why some of the content is so bad. People that watch me, it's funny, you mentioned that you're a Souls guy. People that watch me know that watch me for the gaming stuff. That's been one of my lead topics, that I've been so frustrated with with games, in that they're trying to appeal to the widest audience possible, and it makes for a mundane experience, particularly in this level of what they deem as accessibility. And really all that is dumbing the game down, trying to hold the game player's hand, and like steering away from us figuring out problems, solving issues, which is why a lot of us gravitate towards that. You know what I mean? Towards the Souls of the world. It's a punishing game, but that level of perseverance and all that's part of the experience, right? And for what's happening right now in modern gaming, where they, I guess because it's become so popular, they look at it like, well, there's something inherently wrong with there being a barrier of entry for something. And it's not. That's life. That's life in general. Not everybody can do everything.
Right.
It's okay, but that's not anything that's generally embraced right now with modern entertainment, which is why a lot of it feels so mundane. It's because they've become literally the master of none.
Yeah, it always comes back to comfort for them, actually. They don't want to hear opinions they don't like. They don't want to play games that are too difficult. They don't want to read comics that don't appeal to their sensibilities. Like they can't even tolerate that. They don't want to see, films where I don't know if you noticed, but stuntmen, they don't get a lot of work anymore because everything is done with CGI now, at least in the big budget stuff, right? The only people who still do that stuff would be guys like Tom Cruise, for example, or Keanu Reeves with the John Wick franchise. Those movies get a lot of attention because people want to see, stunt men putting in the work, especially if you grew up in the 80s and you saw like all the action movies of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And to your point about the demographics, what's interesting is that they drive away the people that built the industry to the level that it's at. So the brand, it gets built up by the hardcore fans, and then they alienate them because they want to what they don't seem to realize is that the normies, the people they're trying to attract, they're pretty fickle, right? So they'll get into it for a bit, then they'll leave. I'll give you a good example: the Nintendo Wii. When the Nintendo Wii came out, senior citizens were buying it, little kids, families, everybody was super excited, and I was not a fan. I thought motion controls was a gimmick. I didn't think that it was gonna be a long-lasting thing. Sure enough, like every family member I know that bought a Wii, it's in their closet collecting dust because they played it for a while and then they got their rocks off and then they left it alone. And so I think that the hardcore market, and I don't even want to say hardcore, I would say just like the market of people that would call themselves, game enthusiasts. You don't have to be like one of these guys that does like, speed runs or you play every Souls game like I have. I played all of them, but you don't have to be one of those people. Just somebody who likes to, feel like their contribution in a game matters.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's not, you're not just like, how I've noticed this, that a lot of games these days are doing exactly what you said, where they say you can basically play this so that you're just experiencing the story.
Yep.
And I think this is important to point out because they will try to make that the norm, the default. Yeah. They will make, they already do it with like visual novels, for example, which, I know there are probably people here that like visual novels, but hear me out. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them. I'm saying that my media should not become that, right? So if I want to play, I don't know, like a Souls game, for example, or the new Armored Core, which I'm super excited about, I don't want them to put like a story mode in there. I want to play the game. Like that's why, and I think that it's all about comfort. They just want to feel like they can belong, and so they hate games that challenge them.
And that's such an attitude issue that I believe is like, dare I use their term, toxic, to put on, definitely instill on younger people, where it's like, what do you have to strive for if you're like, if there's no barrier of entry at all, right? And you have your contributions literally don't even matter, and you're going to be put up, you can accomplish the same exact thing someone else is. And that's nowadays definitely the competitive aspect of it all has been completely, I don't want to say completely removed, but it's a thing that people look at as if it's a problem, right? To now, again, so many games are now adopting this as an approach. Final Fantasy, the new one, recently got in trouble for trying to give these people all these accessibility things, auto dodge and all of what have you. And, now it kind of backfired because you have these supposed game reviewers making it seem like, because literally they kind of can go through it without really thinking. It's like mindless to be able to complete the game. And I'm like, see, that's where it backfires, and why I believe that more games that should be created. I mean, a lot of the ones that we grew up on, they didn't even have difficulty options at all. The game was the game. You know what I mean? It's just what it was. That was the experience that the devs wanted to give. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that people got to get off of their high horse and think that everything has to be made with them as an individual in mind. And that's just not how it works. That's not life in itself is not like that. There's things that you can do that I can't. There's things I can do that you can't. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a beautiful thing that we can trade and do other cool stuff, be friends, even having been that different. So that's something that needs to be embraced, certainly in gaming, and I hate that this is the direction that they're going in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a couple of guys they're sort of in that space that making their own comics and stuff. I had on RJ. I don't know if you know. I think it's RJ. He has a channel called The Fourth Age. He discusses. I think you've been on his channel. Yeah, because I remember seeing the interview. And I had him on because I really liked his approach to storytelling, the importance of storytelling. So this is the importance of stories. I believe that so I asked myself, why do boys in particular like adventure stories? And we've always liked them, right? You can look all the way back in literature. The Three Musketeers and Zorro and Treasure Island and the Time Machine and all these other, and on into the pulps like Conan and John Carter of Mars or Princess of Mars, Flash Gordon, and then Star Wars, and here we are today. And I think it's because there's something in the nature of males in particular. I think women like them, but I think it's for different reasons. I'll put it that way. They like to see the man doing the adventure. The men like to see the adventure unfold. If that makes sense. So men are attracted to that because it kind of goes all the way back to primitive man. Like there was you're in your tribe and everything, whatever's outside is the unknown. And so men we have an instinct to explore the unknown. We want to go out there and find out what's there. And so men are on the perimeter of society, or at least I'll say the most masculine men or the most driven men will be on the exterior, the perimeter of society, looking for adventure, trying to solve the mystery of what's outside. And it's always been there, right? And so as time goes on, boys, they grow up and they absorb this material in their fiction. They get into comics, they read books, they watch films or cartoons or whatever, and they always have the same kind of arcs that involve adventure and conflict, and there's always a moral thing that's proposed, and the hero does the right thing. Sometimes he has to figure it out, sometimes he knows it, but it doesn't really matter. They see it happen.
Right.
And then those kids, they become men or young men, and they're exploring that more in their real life now, right? They might still be into those stories because that's sort of like where they get that basis that they're drawing from. And so they pursue an education and a career in something that acts like an adventure for them, whether that's starting a business or if that's joining the police force or the military, or it could be scientific pursuits. It doesn't really matter, right? They're just doing something that will put them out there. Maybe they were introverted when they were growing up, and then they're like, I want to be a radio guy, or I want to start a band or whatever. But all of it is an adventure. It's very exciting. You don't know what's going to happen, right? And it gives you great stories to tell other people. And I think that stories are like the primary way that human beings share wisdom. It's the only way. It's the only way, right? So if we want to share our experiences with other people, it can manifest in a number of ways. And of course, comics is one, but there's also writing and music and everything else. And I think that one of the reasons why you're so involved with all these things is a bunch of different ways to tell a story that is near and dear to you. It doesn't have to be about you, but in terms of its abstract framework. And one of the things that I really like to see is as we get more mature, the next adventure for men is marriage. And what all of that comes with. So I'm married and I'm on that adventure right now. My wife and I have been together for 7 years, and I think that it's it's also very exciting. And then beyond that, there's children and family, and all of these are I think they're all very worthwhile pursuits. I wouldn't say that they're for every man, but I think that men have that drive. And so if the stories don't reflect that, and this is what I'm getting at, right? So too many stories today are about people that men that don't grow up, like Seth Rogen, for example, they stay teenagers and they you know what I mean? They watch porn, they play video games, whatever. Yep. And I'm all about video games, but they promote a kind of failure to launch. And I don't blame men for falling into that trap, especially because a lot of these men don't have a father that models that behavior. right?
100%.
So you see, like, there's like this cascading effect, and this is why I think stories are really important.
Oh, I'd agree. I mean, even Jesus told parables. So, I mean, it's a thing that it has always been a way that man has been able to, at minimum, communicate definitely between generations. So it's so very vital and so very important, and a lot of people aren't getting that story certainly told to them, and a lot of men don't ever become men. They're not ever never taught. I think the fatherlessness stuff is certainly a big deal. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's a massive thing that, and I say this as a person that grew up in, in the way that I did. You know what I mean? I'm married now. At some point, we'll have children as well, and that's something that I want to absolutely pride. I don't think that's the right term, but we'll use it for right now. And pride myself in certainly being that example, and I think it's so very, very important. And also for those youngsters that aren't able to pick up that stuff. I mean, we look at like comic books, and a lot of, you talk about the moral compass, and definitely for a lot of young boys, I mean, that was my age and older, that's where they picked up a lot of that stuff from. You know what I mean? It was from books, from comics. You know what I mean? It was the easily digestible medium, certainly for that. So even they're to first see that sense of like wrong and be able to conceptualize that was told to them in a story, in a comic book for a lot of them,
and it was so cheap too.
Yeah,
like, I mean, I paid 75 cents for a comic book, and that was considered high.
It was easy for them to get into that, and I think that's something that's certainly worthwhile. There's a lot of guys in our corner, a little pocket of the internet, that are actually going out of their way to tell those all ages stories that are going to be very, very impactful for years to come, and it's necessary. Definitely when you understand the bit of nonsense that's being pumped out there in your libraries, your schools, and all of that, is like, if you don't give them something, they're going to stumble across something that's far worse. And really the only way to I think go against that would be to compete with it, and do better as creatives to do that. And this is why they're so necessary. So I got nothing but love for people that are out there trying to be able to be part of the solution and create those stories and tell those stories.
Absolutely. So I want to read some super chats, because some people have sent some super chats and they want to make some commentary, but really good conversation, Eric. Thank you so much. So I'll read through these really quick. Okay, so Mr. 0303 gives us $10 and says, "What are you doing, Brian? It's dangerous to have Eric on the stream. The amount of concentrated baseness between the two of you can create a singularity. Joking aside, I'm a happy Ripperverse customer, and I wanted to ask Mr. July if Mr. July has thought about the issue of power creep, leaving street-level heroes in comic book universes a bit useless. For example, Batman stopping a bomb that is not as exciting when he can call the Flash to help."
Well, I think there's a way that you tell those stories, and I think it's very important. I think the art of I talk about this kind of with Isom, despite him having powers, is a very grounded story, and I think those street level stories, the art of that has been completely lost, definitely in mainstream comics, despite there being a growing an actual demand for it. And you can see that in the fact that Batman still outsells everybody. So it's not that people don't want it, but there is a way, if you're going to tell a story and that's like a thing that you have to take into consideration right there from the get-go. As you're building your universe, what type of beings that you're going to have in them. And obviously, considering how long these characters have been around, the creators of Batmans and the Supermans of the world, I'm pretty sure they could not conceptualize that their characters would be a part of the fabric of like American culture, like that they even transcend comics. Nobody anticipated that. So that's why I think the cool thing about the Ripperverse is, one thing that we talk about all the time is, I don't tell my story just simply thinking about the now. I think the 5, the 10, the 15 years from now, and I'm calculated in every character that I create, every story it is that we tell, for that exact reason, right? Because you have to be able to consider all of those sorts of options. And I don't think it diminishes those characters. It's still, I think those street level stories are the ones that resonate with
I love them. Yeah. It
sure.
actually really, really upset me when I saw what they did with Shang-Chi. I mean, like, When I heard because they made the announcement and I still liked the MCU at the time because it was years before. And I was like this, and I was telling my friends, I was like, this movie needs to take place in the 1970s, and they need to find a dude that looks like Bruce Lee, and and it needs to be like as Shang-Chi as it gets. But then I realized there was no way they were going to do that because they have, this is the thing about these people, okay? They are true believers. This isn't like a cynical cash grab thing. In fact, if they were greedy, which they often people accuse them of being greedy, I don't even know what that means. But if they were just trying to turn a profit, then they would make something that the fans want. But they don't. So they're anti-profit and they make garbage. And I knew that, as it came closer, I was like, oh, they're not going to do this right because they're going to see the whole thing as a racist stereotype. And so they're going to try everything to go against it. And not only did they do that, because I tried to watch it. I think I got like halfway through and I was like, nope. But they had some female character just outdo him. And I was like, God, you guys, do you ever get bored of this? Because I'm like, I'm over it. But, so as far as like just really quick on my thoughts on the power creep thing, I think that as long as you have, if you're doing a crossover event like a Justice League comic, for example, and you want Batman to matter, okay, there are ways to do it. I think Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, when they were, I think his name is Paul Dini, when they were doing the animated Justice League show, they did a really good job of having everyone like play a role, so that it wasn't just Superman doing stuff, right? And I think that's important. So it's all about how you do it. The problem, though, with DC Comics in particular, is that everything is scaled so high that it's really difficult to convince people that some of these things are out of the reach of their more powerful characters. But in Marvel, they scale everything way down, and I think that even like the Hulk has limits to some degree, right? So I think that it helps to like set your power level. So in your Isom universe, I without going to this character, but like when you're looking at the larger picture, like how godly do you want things to get, or are you going to look more on the Marvel scale?
I've said that it'll be a long time before we get to like some intergalactic, interplanetary, like world threat like that. That it'll be a minute before we get. There's just a countless amount of stories that we can tell right now.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to, like if you're gonna make some like ever powerful being like that, I feel like that needs to matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me, that's the like people see. Isom loses fights. You know what I mean? Like so there is that level of he has his limitations. He has you see it. And in fact, some of his things that he's just not capable of doing in the first book. And I think that can be said for even the other upcoming books that we have going as well, that they're not just a bunch of guys that can do everything. And it is, I think, set and establish those rules, but also weaving within your storytelling. I think that's where the actual talent comes into play. When you have multiple characters that can do various different things, you have to put them in a realm that makes sense. And that's a creative talent. It is that has to be not only developed, but it has to be taken into consideration if it's going to work from the get-go. That's the advantage that guys like ourselves have. I'm not creating in the Stan Lee era. I'm creating in this new era of technology, and I got a direct line of sight with my audience, so I can take things into consideration that they couldn't. You know what I mean? And then we do that in our storytelling.
Yeah, and but Stan, he did try. He used to take letters and respond to them. So I think that what he did was revolutionary in that regard, and it's in our current in where things are now, it's even more, it's like a faster conversation. So absolutely crucial. Thank you for that, Mr. 0303. Anonymous, so somebody who didn't give us the name, they gave us $10 and says autism runs wild amongst libertarians and MRAs. We make natural allies. I would call it stoicism instead. I think because the thing is that I'm not prone to emotional outbursts over things. I mean, sometimes I run into stuff that's really infuriating, especially when it's shitting on art. And I think that, pardon my language, but I do think that there is a broader conversation around arts in general that I've often attempted to initiate in the history of art because I studied it, and I know where everything started to go wrong, where we used to like appreciate talent and skill and effort, and where now it's all about messaging. And this is like over 100 years old. Like this has been going on. So, but thank you for that. I would, again, I stand by it. It's stoicism, not autism. I don't know much about that.
I love that.
Then Mr. 0303 gives us another $5 and says, if Eric is answering Isom questions, was there any inspiration for Sam, and will we see more of him? I found him fascinating because I like bro characters like him. Oh, bro characters are the shit.
Yes, I can promise you that there's going to be plenty of Sam.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what the inspiration is for the character without like going into so much detail and spoiling future stories. But he's not I will say this much: he's not a random character. He is absolutely, he's there, and there's a purpose. He's not just like there just to be on Avery's ranch. So I'm actually glad that there's people that like a character of that level, because I have a lot of.
I love bro characters. So my favorite thing about shonens, because I talked about this. I did a stream. I was streaming an anime video game, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, one of my favorite animes ever. And I talked about the sort of formula of shonens where you have like your hero and everybody loves the hero, but then there's like the close friend.
Oh yeah.
You know, and everyone loves that guy. That's the bro, right? Yep. And I mean, like
Vegetas of the world.
Yeah, Vegeta, or I mean, there's tons of examples.
Yeah.
I was big into Hokuto no Ken, the Fist of North Star, and Ray. He was like the, you know, and every anime has a bro. If it's a good shonen, right? So I think in Yu Yu Hakusho, I forget the guy's name, but he has like the energy bat or whatever.
Oh, there
it
was
is.
several of them. Yeah, man, how am I drawing a blank on his name? That looks like
in One Piece, I think it's Zoro. So you know, there's tons of the bro characters are super important. Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Because it's good because you show the friendship, and again, it's another thing that men they like having that you know, their ride or die, you know, roll dog. So it's a big thing. Okay, thank you for the super chows. So if you want to send us another super chow, you can go to feedthebadger.com/justthetip to send us a super chow, and I will prioritize those over the Rumble rants and the super chat. So I got a Rumble rant from Occupant 42, who gives us $20. Thank you, Occupant 42. I don't know if I have a sound for that. Hold on a second. I might have a thank you. I'll just say hello.
Hello there.
And he says, looking forward to seeing the Honey Badger, Defender of Men and Boys, appear in Isom number 3. It sounded funny in my head. I am not going to suggest that. You do whatever you want to do. But I'm really glad that you're out here doing stuff. I will say that. Albert Nada Retro, this is Super Chats, gives us $5 Canadian and says, if this interview goes well, I'm taking full credit. If it goes south, it's on YouTube. I'm just going to say it. I emailed him a bunch of times. I sent him Super Chats, but I know he's busy, got a lot going on. But thank you, Albert, for, you know, hooking us up with the email address. I guess that was what I needed. And then he gives us another $5 Canadian, says, the problem with Thanos is that you can snap your fingers and make anything happen. Why not create infinite resources? His motive in the comics was better. Yeah, see, I was hoping they would...
death situation.
Yes, him being in love with death.
They didn't run with that. That was so stupid. That was such a layup that they screwed up.
Yeah, they could have done that. I think there is this thing, and I think this was an issue even like back when they were starting to make movies about comic book stuff, where they thought, oh, we're going to do a story about the X-Men, but we couldn't possibly bring the Shi'ar Empire into it because the concept of aliens is just too crazy, right? Yeah. But it was in the comics, right? So they were trying to make everything kind of a self-contained in a vacuum. And with Thanos, I guess they thought, well, we could have like a purple guy with a butt chin, you know, like that wants to destroy it, but he couldn't be in love with the personification of death. Yeah. And I mean, that's what they miss out, because I think that what that is, and this is the thing of what I said to you before about how these people don't take things seriously, they just take it literally, is that Thanos' love affair with death is actually nihilism. That's what it is, right? Mm-hmm. That's why he loves death. He loves death because he is a nihilist. He wants to see everything end. And nihilism is something that is creeping into our culture through our media, right? So maybe, I mean, maybe there's a part of me that thinks that they're doing that on purpose. Like they want people to be nihilistic. They
want you
want
to
to
be
demoralize.
demoralized.
Yes, they want to demoralize. Right. So they're not gonna tell the truth about Thanos, because I think that when they were starting to tell those stories, that's kind of what Stan Lee and whoever else was involved with writing them. I think Thanos came out in the 70s, but that's what they were going with when they started the whole death story. So, are you writing? You're the writer on this book?
Yes, for Isom 1 through 3, I'm writing all of that, and we got Chuck Dixon, the prolific Chuck Dixon, writing Alpha Core, which will be out. That's the next book that will come out, and then Yaira, we have the Saska sisters that are writing those, and then I'm. So yeah, we got a team. We're starting to build here. It's awesome.
Very nice. And I understand that you're working on an animation.
Yeah, so we had obviously we put that filler out there with the trailer, the Isom 2 animation trailer, to kind of see how people felt about it. Obviously, there's a massive demand. In fact, actually, after this interview, there's an email actually specifically in regards to the animation that I'll be tending to, because that's something that I want to take seriously. It's just a matter of figuring out, obviously, more logistical stuff and what's going to be our individual capacity. So yeah, that's really the biggest thing. I'm so excited.
It looks really good. I saw the trailer, and as someone who's always wanted to break into any sort of creative industry, I do what I can to help people. So there's a guy I know, and maybe this is the email, I don't know, but there's a guy I know. I had him on the show, and he was a pro. He worked in the animation industry professionally. He worked on the Ninja Turtles. He worked on Ben 10. He worked on nice. I think it was Over the Garden Wall, and Steven Universe, and he's also made his own books. I don't have it here, but and his name is Luke Weber, and he's been on the show, so he's a friend of the channel. I know you guys know about Luke. Very, very talented guy. Unfortunately, he was working professionally, but the Me Too movement that sort of like blew through the animation industry, and we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but I will say it involves unions that want to put women in positions in animation jobs, and they're pushing the men out. And I have all the receipts, so I'm not just talking out of my ass, and we've done videos on it. So he's not getting any work, and he was living in California, and then he relocated to Texas, and I guess now he lives in Wyoming or something. And I told him I would because he's really good, like he is really good. So I told him I would try to put him in touch with you, because if you want to make this happen, he's looking for somebody to work for, and I think he's totally worth it. He's done some great work for us as well, and just for our books, because we're a pretty small operation trying to get out there. But yeah, I mean, I want to see everything. I want to see like movies and animations, and we just don't need these people. I mean, we don't need them. Like we can build our own things, and I think we can do it better. So what do you have any, I guess, advice for people who are looking to also get their feet wet in this, because this comic book thing in particular, but there are, like, my boss is writing a book, and it's like a science fiction fantasy thing, but it's just a book, right? And I know that there are people that are trying to sort of move the needle in the culture. Absolutely. So that we can, the normies are not really, it's not working. They're fickle. They're moving on to other things.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the culture junkies, I think, I hope they're like a small group of people that won't keep it going forever. So they're going to be looking for something fresh. So what kind of what's been the thing that has kept you moving?
Well, I think people need to understand how realistic things are. I mean, there used to be an insane ceiling that everybody would hit in entertainment, which is why the mega corporation became a thing in the first place. You just could not do it independently.
Yeah.
It was.
Can I just say, so sorry. Can I just say that corporations are not a product of capitalism? Okay, that's all I'm saying. No, not at all. And people always bring it up, but no,
it necessitates the state. So no, that's not what it is. But that's why the mega corporation was a thing, and these whole big massive corporate entities, because they could promise you a new ceiling, essentially, that you would always hit your head under. And this is why, you know, the artist signs to the record label, or the guy that could do stuff in his own individual capacity ends up signing off his concepts to other properties. The reason why that's the thing is because of the ceiling. Well, that's been almost completely removed now for a lot of different industries, namely comics, right? And even in some cases in like the film industry, not necessarily in the direct animation, but because that's still going to cost money, but definitely in the film, you're seeing people do short films with like a DSLR, you know what I mean? They don't
with
need
their phone.
Yeah, they don't need a $14,000 red camera anymore. They don't have to do that anymore. So that, and also the social media aspect of it all, and the internet and the growth of it, is giving you a direct line of sight with the audience. So doing something like what we do, a brand new company, no investors, nothing, to come out and become a multi-million-dollar company in less than a year, actually in less than like a week, a day. I mean, you know, if we want to be technical, that was unheard of back then. There had to be some people pulling the strings. There's no way. Now it's very doable. The Ripperverse is a prime example of that. So I would say that people need to understand that what was generally unrealistic, don't play by those sets of standards and old archaic models, because they're not really, let me say this. There are people that are protective of the status quo, and the only reason they're protective of that because there's probably not a spot for them in the event that this whole thing gets decentralized, right? Which I do think that's the direction that we're heading into. There's not gonna, maybe the day of the mega corporation for certain entities or certain aspects of the entertainment industry are going to be gone, and it's going to be more smaller. There'll be some very, very successful entities. There will be some Ripperverses of the world, but it's a lot more doable because you have a direct line of sight with your audience. So it's realistic is the point it is that I'm trying to make. And even we talk about gaming and how much expensive. I mean, you're seeing what people are able to do with new Unreal Engine and all that. Yeah. Like that's even becoming more
accessible.
Yeah, it's coming more accessible to people. So that's why I would tell people, and I would encourage folks to understand that there's a difference between the old guard and whatever it is that we're entering into now. And you got to play by the new rules, not the old ones. And you'll figure out that there's there's room for a lot of success, and also more importantly to do fulfilling work. Like, you know, everybody that works for the Ripperverse is doing fulfilling work. I pay them on time, I pay them very well, and it's very fair and competitive. So they're a part of a project that they're not dealing with the same problems that they're dealing with in the mainstream. A lot of our guys that work for us, have worked for us, are former Marvel guys, former DC guys that are now in a better spot than what they had been before. So it's a doable thing. It's realistic is the point it is, I guess, that I want to make.
Very good stuff. I'm very excited. Things are looking bright. I think that, you know, there's a lot to be demoralized about, but I think there's a lot more to see as promising. So, in our culture, which I think is extremely important. I think that a lot of people miss it, you know, when you get too wrapped up in like the political, because I think it's, you know, as Andrew Breitbart said, the politics is downstream from culture. Yep. Exactly. So, you know, if you're sharing the right values out there, then people will carry that forward, and they'll know it's right, because there is something about, as the Fourth H says, you know, a good story is a reflection of reality. So if you know that you're seeing something that it feels real to you, then you're going to resonate with it. So, okay, other than your book, because I'm sure you're reading that, who out there are you like interested in or reading? Like, who else that's contributing are you kind of getting into?
I would say that there's a lot of people that are on our corner and on our pocket of the internet that are doing great things. And you know, some of them ended up actually doing cover work for the Rippaverse. Well, yeah, like Shane Davis. BS is also doing some great work with his projects as well. And, you know, seeing what Shane's done with Inglorious Rex and Starlight Cats, and he has his own stuff that he's building. That's inspiring, right? There's people that, and again, these are former comic pros, if you will, that are doing some fantastic work with everything it is that they're doing, and everybody's trying to work towards. I think the crowdfunding element has introduced a new element for some people that just wasn't available for them now.
Yeah, that's why they're trying to stop it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, hey, we don't have to go through you anymore. We can just let the crowd fund it. So, but that in itself is a lot of people that are coming from that that aspect that we're seeing do awesome things. Razor Fist, but a good friend of myself doing his thing with our man's G Prime. And goes to the Badlands, which they're finishing. They should be feeling that very soon. So it's a lot of people in our little corner. That's what's fun about this, because there's a lot of people in our corner of the internet that are doing some awesome things in comics. That we collaborate every now and then. Like I said, you look at the cover B and cover C for Isom 2. That was done by Ethan Van Sciver. He has a lot of his own work with Cyberfrog and everything. And Shane Davis did our foil coverage. So they're individually doing their own thing, and it's fun to watch. And I'm not a spiteful guy. I'm a guy that loves to see other people be great, and I certainly want to see my friends be great. So to see other people in our corner seeing a lot of success has been awesome.
Absolutely. We all benefit, right?
Yeah.
So are you going to do any crossover stuff with other people? Because this is something that I'm sure people have asked about. Like, do all these books, could they exist in the same universe? I know that's a big ask, but think about it like George Perez, a legend, one of my favorite artists, up there with like Scott Adams and Walt Simonson. Those are two of my absolute favorites. Mark Silvestri. Anyway, he illustrated, because George Perez's big thing was crowd shots, right? And he did this great crossover, Justice League versus the Avengers. I think it was like Justice League Avengers crossover. A huge book, and he had a big crossover, but, it was kind of a one-time thing. Like, after that, everything sort of reset to normal. Have you guys ever talked about anything like that? I know it seems a little silly, but I bet the fans would love it.
Yeah, I know people like it's hard, definitely with a universe like ours that prides itself so much in like the continuity element and all that. So that's what a crossover stuff kind of, I don't know how we would generally pull that off. However, I will say this: if there's like a cover or something, we've seen people do that as a collaboration. Like, you'll see some person's IP collaborate with somebody else's on a cover. That's been really cool to see. But yeah, like those massive crossovers, it's going to be difficult to do that with ours, just because we pride ourselves so much on the continuity aspect of everything.
No, I understand.
Yeah, but I love to collaborate with people that are also doing awesome things. So if we can do that in a way that makes sense, for
like
us,
like a one-off thing.
Yeah, like if we can make it make sense, it has to make sense.
For sure.
And I'm willing to hear it out. That's for sure.
All right, well then, never say never.
Yeah.
So that sounds really cool. And I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you, going back to video games for a moment, because it's one of my passions. So what are you currently playing, and on what platform, and what are you looking forward to?
Well, man, I've been in kind of a funk right now. I played obviously a lot of Elden Ring. People
Hell
that know me played all that, and I'll float from PS5 as well as PC. Even though I have the Xbox, it's really useless, the fact that I have a PC. But I'm playing on whatever that I can play, and there are some games that I'm intrigued by. I've said this before. I'm really hoping that I get some good. There are some that look intriguing, like the next gen MMO experience. I'm hoping that we get very, very soon, because I love our online RPGs, however that looks. But right now, it's like it's not a whole lot out there that I'm like, oh man, I'm looking forward to playing this. I'll play every now and then a little something. But like I say, Elden Ring probably, I think, was the most recent game that I came back to and clocked the most hours in.
Yeah. Do you like fighting games?
Yeah, I could play. I know Street Fighter recently came out. I hadn't played it yet, though.
I'm not crazy about Street Fighter 6, but I loved Street Fighter. I grew up on that. Street Fighter 4 actually was my favorite, because I like the roster the most. I played 5 when it first came out, but I didn't like the model they had, where there was only some characters and there was no arcade mode, and you had to like download. I was like, no, I'm not participating in that. I'm less critical of DLC than most people. I can be pretty forgiving, but it has to make sense. If I feel like I'm being exploited, then I'm not going to do it. And I'm not a fan of 6, but I was, big into Tekken. I got really good at that, and like Guilty Gear. And that's actually a good another thing I wanted to mention about that is that a lot of those games are getting dumbed down too.
Oh, absolutely. Combos,
I know. Yeah. And so like that, that's another thing that I'm seeing happen. Like, I understand the last Guilty Gear, which I didn't buy, was, you know, you could just mash combos and it didn't have the complexity that the old ones had.
Yeah.
So, and I think fighting games, it's a problem because, you know, what's interesting is the fighting game community, I brought this up before, you know, these people that claim to care about like minority representation, like they're all about the fighting game shit. Like if you look, it's like, it's all like Asians and Hispanics and black people, like they, you know, but I mean, not that it matters to me because it doesn't, but it's interesting, you know, that that kind of, that hardcore experience is being nerfed basically, you know, so, all right. Well, I was just curious about that. I'm currently playing, I think, Jedi Survivor, which I do I stream that here on this channel whenever I get into it, and I'm liking it because it's kind of soulsy, you know. But yeah, I've been doing that, and I'm kind of interested in Helldivers 2, which I saw.
I saw the trailer for that yesterday. That looks sick.
I loved Helldivers. That was so much fun, and also what was the last one? Armored Core. 6, because you know, from Soft is like, I love those guys. They can't do wrong in my opinion. But anyway, we've been going for a bit. I think you got to go probably. So I appreciate you hanging out. And again, stick around a little bit because I want to say a few things at the end here. But let me wrap it up for everybody else. Let me make sure I'm not missing any super chats or anything. No more super chows, no Rumble rants, no super chats. All right, so. Thanks so much for coming on today's show. If you guys like this video, please show me by leaving a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. Check out the links in the description so you can check out Isom number 1 and 2 and be ready for whenever have you started the fundraiser for 3 yet?
We started like pre-order campaign for the pre-order campaign is still happening for 2. Right now, so yeah, 2, 3 that probably won't happen until like early next year. So 2 is the one you want to get in on. Yep.
Well, yeah, get in on that, and yeah, check out all the links. Follow them on Twitter and all that, and hopefully, if you're new here, you're following us as well. I'm not on Twitter. I got banned from Twitter like years ago because I basically made fun of commies, and they don't like that. But you know. So yeah, because I said that they're basically the same as Nazis, and you can't change my mind. So yeah, I'm not on there, but you can follow at HoneyBadgerBite on Twitter, and I do manage that account, even though it's technically Allison's. So thanks so much. I did get one more super chat at the end, so I'll go ahead and read it. Albernated Retro gives us $20 Canadian and says, make an interpretational X-over or crossover in a classic Secret War story. Characters from each universe brought together by a mysterious force to study the concepts of good and evil. And then he says Star Trek, the TOS Savage Curtain. I guess that's the original series, like a reference. All right, well, thank you, Albert. Not a bad idea. Again, never say never, but we'll see. Let's hope it blows up to the point where that becomes feasible. So thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.